Good morning. We're going to try something different down here today, and if you hate it, be sure to let me know. But we're going to give it a try down here this morning. My name's Will. I'm one of the pastors here, and chances are you don't need me to tell you that this is a great place in part because of the people who make up our team. And you've seen our leadership this morning, in just some of our leadership in children's ministry, in youth ministry. We've got a great pastoral staff. We've got a great band. We're incredibly grateful for the folks who make up our team. And I want to take just a moment to say thanks to Rob Mason, Rob Mason, if you've been part of this church a long time, Rob and his wife Kim were connected to this church for 2 decades. And for part of that time, they were part of our praise band and then led part of our praise band for a period of time. Rob has served as our church administrator, basically running our office and the business of the church for the last several years. And Rob is going to be leaving us to take a position at a new church. And so Rob would be mortified if he knew I was saying any of this, but he's not here, so that's too bad. So all I want to say is his leadership has been incredible, and his presence in this church has made a difference for the kingdom of God. And he helped us, especially in the pandemic, to chart a path forward for Powell Church. So we simply ask that you keep his family in your prayers. His last day in our office will be this upcoming Friday. We do have an opening. We are hiring for a part-time business administrator in our church. We'd love to talk to you about that if you or someone you love is interested in that. But we want to lift up Rob and his family this morning and hold them in our prayers for sure. Part of our great team includes a childcare that is here, which many of you know about as well. Many of you perhaps came up through that childcare or came up working in that childcare. I have 2 kids who are 5 and 2 that are both part of that childcare right now. And my 2-year-old, Sophia, in her class, they have teachers that do a great job using this consistent language of, we don't blank our friends. Some days it manifests itself as, we don't kiss our friends. Some days it manifests itself as, we don't hit our friends. Some days it manifests itself as, we don't bite our friends. Just kind of depends on what's going on in the 2-year-old classroom that day. So, my wife and I, we're trying to reinforce what's being taught in that space. And so sometimes in the morning when Sophia's had a tough day or a tough night or whatever, when we'll drop her off, we'll say, okay, bye, Sophia, have a great day. Remember, we don't hit our friends. And then just kind of drop it off and go. And it's when I do that and then I walk down the hall to my office, it's funny for me to think about like the things we say to little kids when we drop them off that we would not say to our adult friends. Like, I don't look at Alex and say, my wife works at Carm, I don't look at her and say, bye, have a great day at work, don't hit your friends. Or she doesn't look at me in the morning and say, hey, I love you, have a great day. If you need to use the potty, make sure you tell somebody. Like, we don't, typically there's a good distinction there between those things, but there is, in addition to I love you and have a great day, there is one thing that I find myself saying to my young children and other children of various ages, and that seems to be a good idea throughout all stages of life, which is sometimes when I drop them off, I will find escaping my lips, bye, I love you, have a great day, make good choices. And that, really, make good choices, that's what we're about, right? We are about being human beings who are trying to grow in the love and grace of God, but when we ask ourselves, what are we trying to do most? At home, what is a family for? What are we trying to instill in our children of all ages, including some in their 40s? What do we want them to know? What do we want them to do? And we want a home to be a place where people are loved. We want a church to be a place that comes alongside a home and helps us do being a family better and stronger. But a lot of that actually gets lived out in make good choices. A home, as much as anything, is a place where we want to be an environment that cultivates the making of good choices. Andy Crouch, who wrote The Tech-Wise Family, calls this the development of wisdom and courage. That more than anything else, we want our homes to be a place where people learn how to develop wisdom and courage. The wisdom to know what a good choice is, and then the courage to go and make that choice. And so we started a new series this morning called TechWise. It's based on this book that he wrote called The TechWise Family. And the book is about how to develop families and churches and relationships that help us make good choices. But it's also about technology, because there's something about technology that can get in the way of our making of good choices. Now, anytime we talk about technology, it's tempting for us to say, things are different than they've ever been. And things got different than they've ever been, faster than they ever got different. I think it's kind of the birthright, no pun intended, of every generation to look back at their parents and say, they don't know anything about me, man. They don't know anything about the life that I am living. But there's a truth about technology, too, that the speed with which things change, is not particularly unique to right now. In 1946, at the end of World War II, only 6,000 American households had a black and white television. But just 5 years later, in 1951, there was a black and white television in 12 million American households. So perhaps that, if it's your grandparents' generation or whatever it may have been, there was this distinction and this gap suddenly of one generation that had never even seen a television, and then the next generation where it was in your house all the time, and you had this thing, even if you only had 3 channels or whatever you had, it was right there, and there was this focus being given to that. For my generation, no doubt it is the internet, because when I was born and growing up, there was no such thing, or at least as far as I knew, as the internet. And then when I was in high school, all of a sudden, our household was filled with the sweet, sweet sounds of that dial-up modem trying to connect to America Online. That is a sound that my children, thankfully, will never know or understand, followed by the sounds of my mom yelling, "Get off the phone!" In 1990-something, almost no one had the internet. Even in 2000, only 1 in 3 American households had the internet. Today, who doesn't have the internet? The numbers are by 2015, 5 in 6 American households had the internet. So there was this distinction between the way it was before and the way it is now. So technology has always kind of moved fast. The difference with now is this. In 2006, no one had one of these because they didn't exist. That's only 17 years ago. And in 2011, only 1 in 3 Americans had one of these. But by 2021, 5 out of 6 Americans had one. And the difference about your smartphone is that it goes with you. For all the ways that black and white television, or even a big fat Dell computer with a loud modem and all that stuff hooked up to the internet, for all the ways that that changed us, those were still places you went to and could walk away from. I don't know about you, but this is much harder to walk away from, mostly because it lives in my pocket and it walks with me. So now technology has become something that goes with us everywhere and is accessible everywhere. I have got better at just smoothly reaching into my pocket and pulling this thing out and flipping it up where my thumb's right on the power button and scrolling and putting in my code, and then there it is and all that stuff. I could do that blindfolded. I could probably do it in my sleep. And many people do it in their sleep at 3 a.m. or whenever we are stirred in the middle of the night. We'll talk about all these things as we go through this series. It's not that technology inherently makes us make bad choices. You can make some bad choices on your smartphone for sure, but it's not that it just by itself automatically leads to the making of really bad choices. It's that there's something about this that can dull our senses to wisdom and courage. There's something about this and the proximity of it to our lives. We would say a proximity of it to our hearts, the proximity of it to our very person, that can dull our senses to what wisdom and courage really are, because we want to make good choices. And we want to be part of households and churches that make good choices. And to do that, we need wisdom and courage. So For the next few weeks, we're walking through this book, The Tech-Wise Family. We do have a number of small groups that are coming up around this book. All of those will start this week. There is a Tuesday night small group that is for women only. There is a Thursday night small group that is open to everyone. There's also a Thursday night small group that my wife and I are leading on for parents of elementary school children and younger. If you go to palchurch.com, right on the front page, you can sign up for any of these groups. We are excited about walking through all of these things together. When it comes to wisdom and courage, I want to show you one passage this morning. This is a Bible. Chances are you have one. It might be the big, like in front of your fireplace kind that's too heavy to bring here. But as we're walking through this series, you know, if you want to old school it and bring one of these, wouldn't be the worst thing. In this Bible, I'm going to read from 1 Kings this morning because in 1 Kings, Solomon and God have a conversation. Solomon is king of Israel. Israel has really reached its pinnacle. His father David united the kingdom and won many battles and slayed giants and did all that. And now Solomon is building a temple and Israel has kind of reached its peak. And so God and Solomon have this conversation. This is 1 Kings 3. It will still be on the screen because we're not terrible people. It will still be on the screen, but 1 Kings 3 in verse 5 goes like this. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, Ask what I should give you. And Solomon said, You've shown great and steadfast love to your servant, my father David, because he walked before you in faithfulness, in righteousness, in uprightness of heart toward you. You have kept for him this great and steadfast love. You've given him a son to sit on his throne today. And now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant, that's Solomon talking about himself, you've made your servant king in place of my father David, but I am only a little child. I don't know how to go out or how to come in. And your servant is in the midst of the people whom you have chosen, a great people so numerous they cannot be numbered or counted, the fulfillment of a promise from way back in the beginning of this book. And so, in verse 9, give your servant, therefore, an understanding mind to govern your people, able to discern between good and evil. For who can govern this, your great people? God asks Solomon, or God tells Solomon, ask for something. And if you know the rest of this story, because Solomon does not ask for victory over his enemies or power or riches or essentially does not wish for more wishes, but instead asks for wisdom, God will grant him all of those other things as well. At the peak of their powers, their leader, when approached by God and told to ask for something, humbles himself, probably knows himself well enough to say, I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing here, and I need help discerning what is good. What is a family for? What is a church for? Good is kind of our word, even though it's been lost a little bit. But good is when God creates this whole thing, he looks at every piece of it and calls it good. He finishes that creation with you and me, human beings, and calls us very good. And by our very nature as human beings, we're going to need some grace. And so when God sends his very self and his son, Jesus Christ, he gives us not just a message, but a person, and we call that good news. We want to be able to discern what is good. To know that grace is good and grace is here, but also to make good choices, to be able to discern what is good. And to do that, we're going to need both wisdom and courage. We need both. Wisdom without courage doesn't accomplish much. Courage without wisdom is jail, probably. So we don't want to do that either. We want to be a place that is practicing how to make good choices. So we're going to walk through this on Sundays. There'll be all kinds of small group opportunities that are there, but also as the season of Lent approaches, we're going to invite all of you, whether you're in a small group or not, or whether you got little folks at home or not, we're going to invite all of you to join us in this challenge for Lent. Lent starts on February 22nd, on Ash Wednesday. And from February 22nd through Easter sunrise on Easter Sunday, we are going to invite you, yes, you, and all of the people in your household to take one consistent, meaningful, screen-free hour each day during Lent. I like being down here closer to you because I can see how much you don't like this. That's good. That's perhaps you've played the Lent game before, and you've given up chocolate or Mountain Dew or various things to varying degrees of success. Lent is about journeying with Jesus through the wilderness, and it's about separating ourselves from things. And so for everyone, we're going to invite you to join us during Lent in taking one consistent, meaningful, screen-free hour for 40 days. Consistent as in not everybody in the church is taking the same hour, but everybody in your household should take the same hour each day. We did this at our last church, and Alex and I took 4 to 5 p.m. every day during Lent. No screens. No screens means no TV, no smartphones, no Nintendo Switch, no tablet, nothing with a screen for an hour, for the same hour every day, for everyone in your household, for 40 days. Meaningful means meaningful, which is to say, no, you can't take 3 in the morning. It's good. Listen, we're all people. We know what people do. It's all right. No one here is pretending that they're not a person. We need grace. No, you can't take 3 in the morning. If you're already the sort of person that's like, well, I go for a run every morning at 6, so I'll just, no, you can't take a pre-existing screen-free hour. It needs to be consistent and meaningful. Now, I'll tell you this as a bonus. Lent is 40 days and 40 nights. It's a time of testing. If you add up all the days between February 22nd and April 9th, that's actually 46 days. Do you know why? Oh, you guys, listen, y'all are some good Lent practicers in here. In Lent, Sundays don't count, which is a way of saying you're in a room right now on a Sunday morning because it was a Sunday morning when Jesus was risen. That's why you go to church on Sunday morning. And the resurrection tops everything. So let me say, if this is a discipline that you would like to include in your life, maybe even beyond Lent, maybe don't skip Sundays, but skipping Sundays in Lent is not cheating, it's Jesus. It's a way of saying on Sundays we don't fast, we feast. Yeah? So, I don't know of a better way to say it than you don't have to do it on Sundays. But for the other 40 days, or even on Sundays, if you'd like to make this a regular discipline in your household, we invite you to join with us, you, in one consistent, meaningful, screen-free hour. And just a couple practical thoughts on that. It's a screen-free hour, but it's not a technology-free hour. And there are some things in life that really are technology that we may have forgotten to think of in that way. There are cultural artifacts in human history that we've kind of come to take for granted because now everything is on this. So you can't do this, but allow me to help us consider a few cultural artifacts. This is a book. It has pages. It smells kind of nice when you first get started. During your screen-free hour, you can read a book. If everyone in the room will examine their feet, except for Dawson, you are wearing shoes. There was a time in history when human beings didn't have shoes. You know what shoes are good for? Going outside. Remember outside? Outside, there's no screens. Chances are, some of you have an ancient technological device called a radio, or maybe even farther back, a record player that doesn't have a screen on it. I mean, maybe you have a super fancy record player that does, but it might be defeating the purpose. Music doesn't have a screen. Again, we're all human beings. When Alex and I did this 4 years ago, we took 4 to 5 p.m. And we took it in March, which means if you love college basketball, you need to consider your hour because the problem is there's going to be NCAA tournament games that happen throughout the day. So if you really want to not hurt yourself there, you need to take the morning, just FYI. When 4 years ago, if you remember the Grant Williams Admiral Schofield team that they played Kentucky in an SEC tournament game that was a really great game that tipped off at 3. So at 4, we turned it off, and I went in my kitchen and stood next to my Alexa, which does not have a screen, and about every minute said, "Alexa, what's the score of the Tennessee game?" So when you think to yourself, I need some grace with this, you will, and me too, and all of that. So we want to be a place that seeks to make good choices. Because a family, whatever age of the children or the adults we're sending out into this world, more than anything, we want them to know that they're loved, and we want them to make good choices. We want ourselves to make good choices. And to do that, we're going to need wisdom, and we're going to need courage, and we're going to have to be paying enough attention to the world and the outside, and maybe even a book or two, to be able to figure out what that is. In your screen-free hour, chances are you'll find yourself like looking at a person, and maybe you'll think to yourself, I haven't looked at people for an hour, for a minute. But we need more of that too. We want to be a place that helps cultivate wisdom and courage, and we do all of that from a place of grace. We don't seek to make good choices so we can be good enough for God. We seek to make good choices because God has been more than good enough for us. We don't seek to earn our salvation. It's not something we can. It's something we already have in Jesus Christ. And it is by grace that we are saved. And it is that grace that now calls us forward into this life of good news and a good creation and trying to pursue good choices.